Hello, my name is Emily, and today I'll be talking about my research project titled Rediscovering Yourself, the Impact of Retirement on Identity and Mental Wellbeing in Retirees in Wales. In this presentation, I'll be covering some theories about identity and the impact of identity on mental health. I'll then share our research question and the method we use to answer it before going into the results of our study and what this means for counsellors who are interested in working with retirees. So, what is identity? Role theory suggests that we integrate roles into our self-concept and use them to understand ourselves and describe ourselves to others. People take on roles throughout their lives, which integrate into their identity and affect their behaviour and how they relate to others. These integrated roles provide a sense of stability and confidence. A change in role, such as becoming a parent or losing a job, can shake the individual's sense of self. If they struggle to adjust to their new role, this can cause knock-on effects on their self-esteem and sense of stability. Where an event causes an individual to re-evaluate their identity, it can be considered an identity disruption. Work roles are often integrated into identity where the individual feels a sense of purpose and value in the role. The loss of a valued role can cause difficulties, but the transition to a new identity may also come with challenges. Continuity theory suggests that as we move through life, we develop patterns of behaviour and thought, and maintain those familiar patterns and use them as a foundation for predicting ourselves and others. Maintaining this familiarity allows the development of a sense of belonging, which builds self-esteem and resilience. Changes to those patterns may cause someone to feel disoriented and reduce their feelings of belonging and understanding as they respond to the change, which can impact on their self-concept and confidence and trigger an identity disruption. A role transition is described in the literature as a change to one's position in a social structure, which involves psychological, physical, relational, or behavioral movement. Role theory and continuity theory suggests that a role transition is likely to cause changes in identity and impact on psychological well-being. Retirement involves leaving a workplace which acts as a social structure with a very clear role and social standing attached. Physical and behavioural changes may occur as the individual adapts to a new schedule, a lack of commute, and a new financial situation. Relational changes describe the loss of relating to others at work as boss, co-worker, or friend. The loss of the social structure provided by being part of the workplace and the disruption of the working role is likely to trigger an identity change. The social identity model of identity change, or CIMIC, describes how social groups act as protective factors when facing identity change due to a significant event such as retirement. Social groups that the individual identifies with act as personal resources by acting as a source of purpose, social support, and a foundation to build self-esteem and resilience, which positively affects mental health. The CIMIC model is shown here. You can see that someone who goes through a significant life transition has two pathways. One involves maintaining memberships of the groups they still identify with and using them as a resource to manage the life transition. The other pathway involves gaining new identities through joining new groups, which can take the place of the identity lost during the life transition and positively influence adjustment. This model suggests that those who belong to multiple social groups are less at risk of identity disruption because of life changes, due to being able to pull from other sources of identity during the transition. In this way, social groups are a protective factor for identity disruption during retirement. So, retirement is likely to affect identity and trigger identity change through a loss of a work role, discontinuation of patterns of behaviour, and changing of social groups. This then influences one's mental health as identity acts as a foundation for developing self-esteem, confidence, and a sense of belonging and purpose. Those transitioning to retirement are therefore at higher risk of maladjustment and mental health difficulties, mediated by identity and how they experience the identity change associated with losing the work role. Those who adjust well to retirement are likely to experience a positive spiral and therefore have good long-term outcomes, but those who struggle to transition to retirement are more likely to experience psychological distress and worse health outcomes. This highlights the importance of supporting this population in the transition to retirement. This study focuses on the experience of retirees in Wales. This is because the retirement age in the UK is higher than the average age of retirement for America and Europe, suggesting that factors affecting those in the UK may be different to those in other countries. Older people in Wales are likely to have worse finances and health than the rest of the UK, yet there is little research on the impact of this on the experience of transitioning to retirement in Wales. As the number of retirees in Wales is set to increase, it becomes more important to understand the impact of retirement and the factors that affect psychological well-being in this population. This project aimed to fill the gap by specifically investigating the experience of transitioning to retirement for Welsh retirees. The study aimed to answer the questions: does the process of role transition during retirement influence identity, and how does that impact their psychological well-being? Now I'll move on to the method of this study. This study was a qualitative study with semi-structured interviews. Thematic analysis was run on the transcripts according to Brown and Clark's method. This was an exploratory study, meaning that the study didn't have any specific predictions, as the literature on the effects of retirement on mental health has found mixed outcomes. The study did not include any deception, and debrief sheets included signposting to appropriate support services in case any discomfort was experienced from the interview content. Questions from the interview protocol are on the slide here, focusing on a broad view of the participants' experience of retirement and factors they felt are important to them now that they have retired. Please do pause if you would like to read them. As you can see, the questions focus on participants' experience of retirement and ask about their identity and mental well-being. The semi-structured nature of the interview allowed the flexibility to ask for elaboration or clarification of responses, while keeping a uniform structure to the interview so that they are consistent and focused on the research questions. The student researchers practiced the interview protocol beforehand and had training and prompts to use if a participant became upset during the interview, including pausing or stopping the interview if a participant became distressed. Researchers scheduled interviews to ensure that they could check in with each other afterwards for a debrief to ensure the well-being of the interviewers as well. Participants were recruited using convenient sampling by scanning a QR code on posters or social media posts. The QR code led to an online form to check their eligibility for the study and read information forms before they were invited by email for an online interview. The eligibility criteria were that the participants must be over the age of 18, they must have retired within the last 10 years to ensure that they're able to recall in detail the experience of retiring, they must not hold a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, they must have access to a device with a camera and microphone that they can use for the interview and a private place to do the interview, and they must live in Wales. The online questionnaire also asked them to consent to being recorded and consent to their data being used for the study, and gave information about secure data storage and the procedure for withdrawing information should they wish. Interviews were then conducted and recorded using Microsoft Teams. Participants were reminded before the interview began about their rights to withdraw their information, refuse to answer questions, or stop the interview at any time. After the interview, participants were sent an email thanking them for their participation and a debrief sheet. After the interviews were transcribed, the transcription was sent to the participant to allow them to redact or add any information they wished before analysis began. Once each participant confirmed they were happy with the transcript, thematic analysis was conducted. We conducted 11 interviews for this study. However, one was removed before final analysis due to methodological error. This left 10 transcripts were analysed using thematic analysis. The demographic data of the participants is shown here. As you can see, we interviewed 9 women and 1 man, all of whom lived in North Wales. The ages of the participants range from 54 to 72. 3 main themes were found, with 2 or 3 subthemes in each. The main themes were connection, with the subthemes of family and friends, negotiating identity, with the subthemes of negotiating a new working identity and continuation of behaviour, and freedom, with the subthemes of health, time, and choice. The first theme was connection. This theme has 2 subthemes, family and friends. All participants emphasised the importance of other people for their emotional health. Connections were especially significant where participants were asked what they would do if they began to struggle with their mental health. 7 of the 10 participants mentioned that they would want to speak to their friends or family first to get informal support before considering speaking to their GP or getting formal mental health support from an organisation. While for some this was because of a reluctance to access support services, others mentioned that they felt they don't need mental health support and that friends and family provide the support they need. The subtheme family described participants' experiences of maintaining and improving their relationships with their family. Some participants spoke about a desire to use their retirement to spend more time with their family and how their family role became the dominant descriptor of their identity. Family or familial relationships, such as describing oneself as a surrogate grandmother, were described as a main focus in retirement, with mentions that they wouldn't have been able to spend so much time providing support or being with their family if they were still working. This subtheme was associated with positive statements about retirement. The second subtheme of friends described how friendships and social circles often changed throughout the transition to retirement, as workplace social circles were left. Some participants described social groups staying the same as colleagues retired with them or found support in other social groups that they were already members of, such as their church community. Others mentioned forming new social groups in retirement and joining groups based on their interests. Participants all emphasised the importance of having those social circles for their well-being and mental health. The second theme was negotiating identity, with 2 subthemes, negotiating a new working identity and continuation of behaviour. This theme describes the ways that participants manage the identity change triggered by their retirement. Participants spoke about seeking value in the way they spend their time and keeping themselves busy as a way to manage themselves in retirement. These statements were often associated with a positive impact on mental health in that they provided a sense of value or allowed them to feel useful or needed. The first subtheme, negotiating a new working identity, describes how participants took up new roles in their community, in a new workplace, or as volunteers within other organisations. The social standing of holding a role is still present, although the role has changed from their role in the workplace to a new role of their choice. Some participants described working for themselves, returning to work in a different role, or volunteering for local groups and community centres such as theatres and hospitals. This describes the integration of a new role into their identity. This was considered beneficial for their mental health as they felt they were contributing to their community and providing value. The second subtheme for negotiating identity was the continuation of behaviour. This subtheme described how participants seemed to value staying busy and keeping up, with some expressing a firm avoidance of slowing down. This was associated by some participants to concerns about their health deteriorating and staying busy to avoid their health declining. Many expressed that staying busy was good for their mental health, and some stated staying busy was a main focus now that they are retired. This may indicate that this behaviour is a common coping mechanism to retirement and helps them adjust as they get used to scheduling their own time. This behaviour may also be a continuation of the busy lives that the participants held before the retirement and the habits that they held before they stopped working. The final theme is freedom, with the subthemes health, time, and choice. This theme describes participants' reasons for retirement and what they feel is most important to them now that they have retired. Participants describe the freedom of retirement positively, with many linking this to improved mental health, reductions in stress and pressure, and improved satisfaction with life. The first subtheme focuses on participants' mentions of health as a reason for retiring, the most important thing to them now that they have retired, or something that is important to maintaining their mental health. Participants spoke about feeling pressure to retire due to declining health, or wanting to make the most of their health and mobility under the assumption that they will decline with age. Some participants mentioned being close to people who had had health problems or had passed away, and that this prompted them to reevaluate their priorities and led them to choose retirement. Other participants mentioned that now they are retired, exercising and getting outside is a priority for them, and that it is good for their mental health, with some mentioning that the landscape in Wales has had a positive impact on their psychological well-being. Others mentioned worrying about developing health conditions such as dementia, and that preventative care and good habits are important to them now because of that. The second subtheme, time, describes the freedom to choose how to spend one's time. Participants spoke about enjoying hobbies and trying new things that they weren't able to dedicate time to while working. Many spoke about pressure and stress from being so busy at work being a factor in choosing retirement, and how they are enjoying being able to slow down. This theme was heavily related to improved mental health and reductions in stress, with many participants stating that they felt happier and more relaxed now that they're retired. Some participants explicitly related their newfound spare time as allowing them to refine their identity, whether that was connecting with old hobbies or finding new things to identify themselves by. The final subtheme was choice. This subtheme describes how some participants felt that choosing to retire allowed them freedom from the workplace. When participants described their reasons for retirement, most participants felt that they chose to retire rather than having to leave. However, some participants retired before they felt ready to, due to circumstances such as voluntary redundancy or offers to buy the business pulling forward their decision. Out of the 4 participants who returned to the workplace, all 4 described not feeling ready and only retiring because of their circumstances, rather than because they wanted to choose to retire. Participants who mentioned choosing to retire often spoke about financial freedom giving them the power to choose, feeling grateful that they could choose, and making that decision as soon as they were able to financially make retirement work. So, what do these results mean, and how might these findings impact counsellors who want to work with this population? Firstly, these findings suggest that social connection is a significant factor affecting the adjustment to retirement. Family can be described as a maintained social group that the participants were a continuous member of, providing resources that improved adjustment to retirement through the social identity continuity pathway shown on this diagram. Changes in social groups and finding of new friendships was common, which were described as beneficial for mental health. This suggests that those friendships provided support through the social identity gain pathway. These findings support the social identity model of identity change. The fact that participants were reluctant to access formal support services and would prefer to rely on their friends and family suggests that normalising access to mental health support is needed. However, retirees may feel that they don't need to access support if they have a fulfilling social life and are able to meet their needs through friends and family. This suggests that isolated individuals may be at higher risk of maladjustment and psychological ill health. Staying busy was mentioned on all transcripts and described as good for mental health by participants. This may act as a continuation of workplace habits or a method of managing the transition by minimizing change in other aspects of one's life. The desire to stay busy may stem from a desire to continue workplace habits of structuring their time to avoid loss and allowing the maintenance of identity. In the same way, maintaining a work-related identity by becoming a volunteer or working part-time could act as a consistent factor during the transition by reducing the loss of a valued workplace role. It is clear in these findings that working provided some participants with a sense of value or purpose, and some identified heavily with their working role. This highlights the importance of the working role and how integral to one's identity it can become. Choice has been found in the literature to be a factor in adjusting to retirement. Those who feel they had no choice but to retire are more likely to struggle to adjust. The findings in the study support this. The participants in our study who returned to work all mentioned that they didn't feel ready to retire when they did, and only retired because of their circumstances. This suggests that those who don't feel ready to retire are likely to stay within the workplace beyond the average age of retirement. This highlights the significant role of work in supporting identity and the impact of feeling pushed out of a valued work role on mental health and adjustment. In short, social connection is an important factor in maintaining mental well-being. Services should aim to promote themselves to those who are socially isolated, and social prescribing should be considered for those at risk. Retirees who struggle with their health and mobility may struggle to find a new role that they can move into to reduce the loss of their work role, as many volunteering opportunities and hobby groups require consistent attendance and a level of mobility that renders these groups inaccessible. And finally, the choice to retire was generally considered very positively and allowed participants the freedom to focus on things important to them and explore new hobbies and opportunities. Those who didn't feel that they had the choice in their retirement often sought work again, suggesting that choice may impact the relationship between identity change and retirement and psychological well-being. A significant limitation of this study is that due to convenience sampling, we had a sample of 9 women and 1 man, and all of our participants were from North Wales. To be able to generalise the results of this study to retirees in Wales more broadly, a follow-up study could use purposive sampling and aim to speak to more male participants about their experience, as well as recruiting participants across Wales. Future studies in identity change during retirement may benefit from recruiting participants who retired very recently or using a longitudinal approach to provide more insight across the transition. This study recruited participants who had already retired, and participants were only able to provide detail in hindsight. Further research could provide more insight into support needs during the transition and inform service provision and policy. Future studies should also consider doing a mixed methods approach and including measures of well-being and identity to more clearly understand the strength of the relationship between identity and well-being outcomes and the factors that mediate it. Finally, counsellors working with this population would benefit from being aware of the identity changes triggered by retirement, the possibility of identity difficulties coming up in sessions, and the factor that social support plays in maintaining identity change so that they can best support this population. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you would like to ask any questions or speak to me about my research, I would love to receive emails about it. The references for the papers cited in these slides is on the next slide. Please pause to read in full.